It's a pleasure to introduce Elizabeth Gerber, former student, friend, and colleague, who's an engineering professor at the Siegel Design Institute at Northwestern University. Professor Gerber received a BA from Dartmouth, completed a master's in product design at Stanford, as well as a PhD in management science at Stanford. And then as a postdoc fellow, she was deeply involved as an instructor in developing Stanford's new D School, the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design. Professor Gerber's work focuses on the central challenges of human-centered design. There's an engineering lecture, so there's a wonky diagram on the side here. Human-centered design is inherently multidisciplinary, requiring solutions that simultaneously address multiple realities, those of business, technology, and human values. This is complicated and requires mastering not only one discipline, but many. Professor Gerber has studied engineering design, psychology, and management science. From this multidisciplinary perspective, she routinely uncovers amazing insights and makes connections that leave many of her colleagues wondering, how did you see that? So Professor Gerber is one of the most talented, ambidextrous design thinkers in the field. Let me welcome you to the Thayer School of Engineering and to say how pleased we are that you've come to speak today about your work at the intersection of engineering design and social science.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Roby. That was kind. I really appreciate that. How many people are students in the room? Excellent. When I was a student here 12 years ago, I used to sit, just like you, in a lecture hall and wonder, how is it that the person up there, what is it about their Dartmouth experience that led them to become the person they are? Does anybody also have that same question, or was I the only person wondering about that? Is anything they did at Dartmouth related to who they are today? Does anybody share that question? Okay, some nods. Great. Nobody wants to raise their hand. I will tell you. I'm going to just start the talk by telling you what happened, and then I'll get on with my talk. When I was a student here, I was fascinated and attracted to people and friends and groups and programs that had an action orientation. So if you were doing something as opposed to just talking about it, I was likely there. And so what I did when I was here, just to give you a few examples, was I spent a fair amount of time in the Great Hall. We just had the Great Hall at that point, building and thinking about how to solve problems. I spent a fair amount of time at the Hopkins Center and the studios in the wood shop, building things there. And I also spent a fair amount of time at the Dartmouth Outing Club. I directed the Outing Club program, or rather the DOC Trips program, for a year. So again, my interest was always in doing things and not just sitting around talking about it. And that orientation towards action greatly influenced the work that I'm going to present today from a more theoretical standpoint, and theoretical and applied, but also just deeply impacted the work that I've done over the last 12 years, to the point where people often ask me, where did you get this attitude towards action that you have? And I want to thank everybody in the room, especially the professors and the staff, for giving me that and really instilling that in me so many years ago, starting 16 years ago. So that's how I got to be where I am today, and now I have some thoughts on that. So the title of my talk is Designing for Confidence and Effectiveness. I'm going to start off with a video I received 2 days ago from a student of mine at Northwestern, and I'll describe the video after I show you. It's 1 minute long.
Hello, my name is Matt, and I'm from Istanbul, and this is küfe. It is the basket used by Hamas, the porters in Turkey. Everybody knows what a küfe is, and everybody knows what Hamas is around here. They usually work in weekly farmers markets and help women carry their groceries. They roughly make $5 to $10 per hour for hard physical labor. Most of them have scars on their shoulders and chronic back pain. This is a picture from the 1800s. This is a picture I took. I've lived across the farmers market until I went away to college, and it never struck me that Hamas were carrying küfes on their backs. When I asked one about this, Yashar simply replied, because that's the way we do things around here. So I called a few friends and started a project. How do we co-create a better küfe with Hamas? With materials that can be found in every farmer's market, that doesn't cost more than $10. So simple that it can be copied by other Hamas. Like this. In a week, we changed something that had been changed for centuries. This is around the corner from my house, waiting to be noticed. What's around the corner from you, America?
Okay. So, Design for America is an organization, I recently started it at Northwestern, that is designed for exactly this, for having students take action. And when Merritt came into my office 2 days ago and said, "Professor Gerber, I need to tell you what I did over Christmas break," I said, "Stop, before you tell me, what do typical college students do over Christmas break?" And he said, "Watch video games and sleep." I said, "Okay, just want a baseline. What did you do?" And here's what he did, is he went back to because of his work with this Design for America organization that I've been designing at Northwestern, he went back to his hometown of Turkey, rather his own country of Turkey, and went across the street, a place that he's many times visited, and decided to use his design skills to make social and local impact immediately. And to me, building a program that can instill that kind of confidence that then leads to effectiveness is the way to effectively make change in the world. And so the fact that he came in, and he actually didn't show me this video at first. What he showed me is a bunch of photographs he had posted on Facebook. And I said, "Merritt, this is really exciting. How are other people going to learn about this? How are you actually going to get other people to act?" And he said, "I think I need to tell them the story." I said, "Wonderful, okay, how are you going to do that?" He said, "Well, I have pictures on Facebook and people are starting to respond." I said, "How about you make a video, 1 minute video?" And he said, "I will." And by the way, let me step back. He's not a video major. He's not a film major. He's never made a video before. He's rarely taken pictures of anything he's ever done. He's an industrial engineer. And so he took 5 hours and made that 1 minute video. Do you think that's a pretty good quality for five hours from an industrial engineering student? I mean, let's give him credit. I said, wow, that's great, 5 hours of work. So anyway, I want to start off with that example of Design for America. I'll get back to what this organization is, but what I've been essentially doing is using my background in behavioral psychology and organizational design to design an organization, if you will, that instills confidence and consequently effectiveness in people. Because my vision is if we can get people engaged in these experiences, they'll go out and do this themselves. So, what I fundamentally want to communicate, my goal of the talk is to suggest that we can use design to change people's beliefs in themselves. And specifically, what we can do is improve people's confidence through design and consequently their effectiveness in the world. So let me illustrate. I'm going to present 8 principles that hopefully get at this. I'm going to give an overview of these principles and illustrate them with personal products and experiences that I've designed. So let me tell you a little bit of background of how I became interested in this. There's 2 categories of design I'm fundamentally interested in. One is designed experiences, and the other one is designed products. So there's a couple comments that I find really interesting. On the left-hand side, you'll see this is a reaction to a designed experience that I created, and one of the participants said, "Because you get your hands on, you realize the potential in you to fix the world, and that is what drives the world." So because of this experience, that was the belief they had in themselves. On the right, the Mac, I did not design that, but this is a comment from somebody who was using that product. They said, "When I use my Mac, I believe I can realize my ideas." And this was interesting to me, that design products and experiences could evoke a certain amount of confidence and consequently effectiveness in people. So the framework I'm working with right now is that if we can design interactions with design products and experiences, that can lead to increased confidence. Increased confidence will lead to effectiveness. Let me go into a little bit about, kind of theoretically, what we know about confidence. Is that these are the things that confidence can do. Seems like a pretty good thing to have when you read through this list. Confidence can motivate the goals people set. It can influence the perception of the difficulty of engaging in the task. So perception of the difficulty of engaging in a task. It can determine how much effort is expended. It influences how long a user persists in a task. The attribution and resilience to failure while completing a task influences the willingness to take on more challenging work and nourishes intrinsic motivation. So if you start to think about what it takes to be an innovator, you think that confidence might be a pretty important thing to have to be an innovator. So here's what we know from psychology, ways to build confidence. You can do the task yourself. You do something, you then realize, I can do this, and you do it again. You can see someone else doing a task. For example, I could see my sister doing something, and I could think, well, she's done that, I could probably do that as well. You could be persuaded by your friends that you can do the task. I think that was the primary way that I did things at Dartmouth. I was heavily persuaded by many people that I could do things that I didn't think I could do. Rock climbing, kayaking, you name it. And then you can transfer experience from other domains. So you can think, I've done this in another domain, I can bring that confidence that I have over. Now these are interesting ways to build confidence, but from a designer's perspective, I'm not sure what that means I'm actually supposed to do in the studio tomorrow when I'm designing my products. So what I hope to do is present principles that will allow you to do that. I want to point out that there's a link, mutually reinforcing link between confidence and effectiveness. And if you can get into this loop of building confidence, doing something, because of that, because of doing it, you have more confidence, doing it again, etc. You're positively reinforcing. However, often the products that we have designed and the experiences we have designed intimidate people from the get-go, and they actually can't even get into this mutually reinforcing link. So they won't even try. The first time they try something, they fail at it, they don't want to go back to it. So they don't. I mean, how many people here have a grandmother that's terrified to program her VCR? Right? It's like all it took was one try, and she's done. She's not going back to that thing to try and do it. It's not just grandmothers, grandfathers, parents, everybody are quite intimidated. So from a design, historically, from a design point of view, what we've been focusing on originally was design for functionality. We were really concerned is, does the design do what it's supposed to do? So if I have a telephone, does my telephone allow me to connect on the phone, make a verbal contact with a colleague? That's functionality. Does a telephone do what it's supposed to do? More recently, I would say in the last 20, 25 years, we've gone on to designing for usability. And this is the question, is it easy to use? So if I have a telephone and it is for my grandmother, perhaps I put larger buttons on it because because of her arthritis, she has a difficulty touching the different buttons. So we've kind of moved into this space of maybe actually we want to now think about how easy is it to use a design, not just does the design work. And the space that I'm suggesting today in my talk that I think we should even move farther into, which is consistent with work that's been done in the last decade in particular, was looking at more the blend of emotional and cognitive interactions with design. And what I want to talk about today is designing for confidence, which is, do I believe I can use it? Because if I don't believe I can use that design, I will not use it. So it's really the precursor to use. So what I'm going to do is present principles that hopefully suggest to you that we can use design to actually change people's beliefs in themselves and improve people's confidence and effectiveness. Here are the 8 design principles that I'm working with. I should mention that I'm open to feedback on these. These are not, they've not been written in a tablet. I've not carved them into stone yet. So I'd love some feedback actually on these. First one is provide appropriate challenges. Design principle 2 is design for filler time. 3 is remind people of past and potential for future successes. 4 is evoke curiosity. 5 is feed forward and feed backward. 6 is structure small wins and failures. 7 is create a community of others. And 8, provide authentic experiences. And again, what I'm going to use is designs that I've done. My feeling behind design is you can put up design principles, but unless you've tried to enact them, they're not real. They don't exist. You really haven't validated them. So what I've tried to do is take these principles and design products and experiences that embed these principles. So what I'm going to do is start by illustrating some of the principles by some products I've designed, and then I'm going to move on to designed experiences. And this is when I'll get back to that organization that I was describing earlier. I want to suggest again, just in light of time, I'm going to do an overview of these principles, and the goal is not to get really into depth in any one of them, but to provoke thought and give you a sense of where we might go if we start to design for confidence and effectiveness. So principle 1 is provide appropriate challenges. This is a recent project that will be get to read about it in the computer-human interaction proceedings this year. And here is the goal with this project is This is called brainstorm momentum, and the observation and the literature suggests that there's actually great process losses when people engage in brainstorming, and yet for many other reasons we continue to engage in the process of brainstorming. So the question is, how can we reduce these process losses? And one of the things that happens in brainstorming is that people feel apprehensive about being evaluated. So that's one of the many. So the question is, how can we actually provide appropriate challenges and structure the experience of contributing to the brainstorm up to the process at which they come to the brainstorm. And so what this is a tool that sends out pre-formatted emails 5 days preceding up to the brainstorm, asks you different questions related to the brainstorm topic. This particular visualization is a brainstorm we had about increasing tourism in Evanston. And what happens is that people are asked very quick questions in the preceding days up to the brainstorm, such as, one of the questions here is, what's something that reminds you of tourism? So not something you really have to put a lot of brain power in. You're actually required to respond in 20 words or less, and the intention there is that you'll respond quickly and not think too hard about elaborate answer. What happens is then people arrive at the brainstorm and they have this pre-populated board on the wall. And what's interesting about this is instead of coming to a brainstorm and having a completely blank board, they actually have some work to start with. I'll show you kind of what the outcomes. So we did this, we deployed this tool with some groups that used the tool, and then another group that did not, and several other groups that did not use the tool, and we found that people that used this tool demonstrated greater focus and greater quality and rate of ideation. So that is by providing this really easy challenge at the beginning. By the time they got to the brainstorm actually felt relatively easy. These anonymous answers to each other. This tool we just showed to Procter & Gamble last week. They are thrilled about it, and they want to deploy it in their organization of 140,000 people. So we have a lot of, we need to get the programming a little more robust on this. But it's really exciting that this is something that actually, people who actually have to do this kind of work a lot in the formal setting find that people either show up for brainstorms totally unprepared, or if you send them things to do ahead of time, it's too much work and they won't engage in it. So the idea, by providing appropriate challenges, you slowly warm people up to the process of engaging and build confidence through that warm-up. So from a theoretical standpoint, this is motivated by self-determination theory, which is a theory that suggests that people are motivated to take on tasks that are just beyond their current ability. A task that's too easy is boring, a task that is too difficult is frustrating. So the second one, I'll also use this brainstorm momentum tool I just described. This is an example of people in a room, they're brainstorming on the right board, and they're referencing the visualization of the ideas they generated beforehand on the board, and they can actually, it's fun, they can move them around in an interesting way. This design principle, designing in filler time, is based on the notion that you don't want to compete, when you're designing for confidence, you don't want to compete with the task at hand. And if you make your intention for designing for confidence too explicit, in the words of one of my students, Professor Gerber, it will be cheesy at that point. So it's like you have to be careful. So one of the ways to get around, in his words, I love it, being cheesy, is to design in filler time. So the idea is design before and after the task if you can. So in this particular situation, the tool is not competing with the brainstorm itself. You did the work ahead of time, which was a total of 5 minutes, and then you show up and because of this slow incremental building and confidence, you show up ready to go, as opposed to the groups who didn't have this tool had to go through the warm-up process once they got there, interrupting the potential time to generate good ideas. And what we found is this group started generating ideas earlier, good ideas earlier than the other groups that didn't have the tool. So third principle is reminding people of past and potential for future successes. This project is currently going on. It's looking at how we can use mobile devices how we can use mobile devices to remind people of past and potential for future successes, and actually embed these confidence builders in the device itself. So this is based on some really interesting work that psychologists are doing, looking at power priming. And what they find is that if you ask people to recall a powerful time before, a time when they had they were in a powered situation, and then you put them in a room, and this is a very creative study done by a man named Galinsky at Kellogg at Northwestern and at Gruenfeld at Stanford. If you put people in a room after having primed them with power, you put them in a room with an annoying fan on them, the people who have been primed with a high power situation will move the fan away from them, and the people who have not been primed with a high power situation will not move the fan away from them. I thought, this is really interesting. So their contention, they've done several other studies to follow up on this, is that if you prime people with power, that is, and the way they do it is remind people of past successes, they'll actually demonstrate greater approach behavior if they've been primed in this way. And so I thought, wow, in terms of building confidence and effectiveness, this is really interesting. What if we could have our devices priming us with approach behavior before we're about to engage in a activity with the device that requires some approach behavior? So what we're doing in this study right now is we're priming people with power through the device itself and then having them take photos with their iPhone. And so what we're initially finding in pilot studies is that people who've been primed with power will demonstrate, they're more likely to approach a subject and take a close photograph of it than people who have not been primed with power. So you can imagine situations, actually Professor Latko pointed out another one to me. He said I think his mother is a little nervous about getting on the phone with people. I think that's what it was. And what if you could have your phone actually psychologically prepare you for a fearful situation. So by building, potentially what we can do is building this priming into devices such as mobile devices to prepare to, again, build confidence in people and consequently your effectiveness. So I mentioned that the power priming here. Power priming increases action orientation and risk taking, which are critical for effectiveness, specifically in innovation. Fourth principle is evoke curiosity, and this is, to illustrate this point, I'm going to talk about a toy I was involved in when I worked at Wild Planet Toys, which was, I think I worked at the Moose Lock Ravine Lodge, and then I went to work at Wild Planet Toys, so that was, since over 10, it was really a contrast in San Francisco. But there are similarities between the experience. So this is called the supersonic ear, and essentially what it is, it's a listening device, and it's part of a line of toys that Wild Planet put out at the time, they were called exploration toys. And there's a notion in toy design that what you want to do is design toys for what's called extended play, rather than for one time, one specific use. So there's some toys where all the kid does is push one button and the same thing happens over and over again. And contrast that to the toy where there's many different uses for the toy, such as this. I've seen thousands of uses for this toy, many which we did not anticipate, and probably many which I don't want to know about. But the point there is that if you can evoke people's curiosity through the design, they're actually much more willing to work within the design and work through challenges associated with the design than if it's completely obvious. And let me just give you the theoretical perspective behind this, which I think will help explain this. A man named George Lowenstein at Carnegie Mellon came up with this interesting knowledge gap theory of curiosity, which is that people are inherently motivated to close the gap between what they know and what they don't know, because there's discomfort in not knowing. And in the process of closing the gap, and here's the real critical part, they may persevere through some uncertain conditions. So the trick is, if you ever want to get people to do something, evoke curiosity, and they're willing to be, work with the discomfort of not knowing. And so this idea of extended play, and some of these toys we were designing were based on these principles of, if you can evoke the kids' curiosity, they'll stick with the design a lot longer and build confidence and use it in totally ways you didn't expect than if you totally confine the use pattern. So those are products that I use to try and illustrate how we might be able to design products to improve people's confidence and effectiveness. I'll now go into some experiences that I've designed to illustrate these. So I'm going to move into experiences. So this is going back to this Design for America organization that I recently designed that was illustrated by this video that was shown at the beginning. Design for America is about the goal of the organization. Right now we have chapters at Northwestern and at Cornell, and perhaps maybe one here. The goal of the organization is to make social and local impact through design. And these students right here are designing a hand hygiene project for a local hospital. If you see, two of them are wearing scrubs. I think that was to get them in the mood of this process. And one of the things that I've designed into the organization is that they must constantly feed forward and feed back their ideas. And specifically what I've designed into the program is that they must have forced reflection in a safe environment and provide immediate, direct, and authentic feedback. So things I require them to do is never show up to a meeting without a prototype, without 10 prototypes. So they're constantly feeding forward their ideas. And what this consequently results in is they're always getting feedback. And what I observed throughout my experience at Stanford is that if you tell people to come up with ideas, they'll show up and they'll hand wave and they'll talk a lot. But if they show up with some concrete example, they'll get a lot better feedback. And actually, it's this cycle of feeding forward, putting your ideas out, and getting feedback back that makes you comfortable with sharing ideas. It makes you comfortable with failing, because a lot of your ideas are not well received. And it also gives you feedback for the future designs you're going to make. So one of my design mentors, the founder of IDEO at Stanford, David Kelly, used to say, the best designer gets other people to do their design work for them. So that is, you show up, and by showing up with a prototype, you get everybody else's great ideas into your own design, and that's what actually propels the work. So in this specific example, they're brainstorming ideas for hand hygiene prototypes. They showed up at the hospital the next day with, I think, about 20 prototypes. 18 of them were laughed at. 2 of them were not. One of the ones that was not is now patent pending and likely to be picked up also by Procter & Gamble or the makers of Purell. This was a 6-week project, just to give you a sense of how quickly you can get things done. So from a theoretical standpoint, what I'm basing this premise, this feed forward and feedback on, is the idea that people learn psychological safety by this great researcher at Harvard, Amy Edmondson, who looks at and shows that people learn from failures best in environments where they feel supported, and framing failed performances as learning opportunity allows people to more readily engage in future experimentations. So you'll build confidence if you can frame things as learning experiences, learning opportunities, rather than necessarily as failed performances. Attribution theory, back from, it's been around for a while, shows that when people receive direct and immediate and authentic feedback on performance, they're more easily able to attribute feedback to their actions. So a lot of what I was talking with the students this morning about is the important thing about Design for America is everything is done locally. And the idea is if it's done locally, they can constantly be receiving feedback on their actions. If it's done at a distance, they're always receiving secondary information about the impact of their actions, and it's often at a delayed rate. So they can't build that confidence because they don't know if their actions, the things they did yesterday, are actually helping people or not. And then lastly, constructionism, which is this idea that people learn most effectively when they build tangible objects in the real world. I would argue that you just have to build, you could build non-tangible objects, you can build experiences, but building is the critical part to that theory. So in terms of feeding forward and feeding backwards, this is a very different orientation for a lot of these students. We now have 100 students in the group. We used to have 25 when it first started, or 12, and then 25, 100. And a lot of these folks are engineers, and they're just not used to taking photographs of what they're doing. They're not used to communicating what they're doing. And so one of the things that I require them to do is constantly document what they're doing. And so this student, Merid, first put all his images about the Couffet and the Hummels on a Facebook site. And what I love about this, what's really interesting, is that here's his photographs, he posted them, and on the left he has friends commenting he has his Northwestern friends as well as his friends from Turkey commenting on the work he's done. So they're both in Turkish and in English. And then on the right, he has a chat box going with his mother, who's now so excited about what he's done. She's taken over this project, and she's now, because he's now back at Northwestern, she's now working directly with the Hummels and getting information, because all the women in Turkey, I guess, rely on these people. And she has an intimate relationship with a couple different Hummels, and she's actually getting feedback from him. So it was only by him being able to post this information and feeding forward, if you will, that he could get this feedback and this build this confidence in this process. So here are some quotes after working in Design for America that I found pretty interesting. Because of this process, and this program, participation in this program, people said, "I'm not afraid to fail anymore." Second student said, "I'm no longer satisfied with the status quo. Design for America makes you aware that you have the potential to change things. You have the ability to act." And a third person said, "I learned a lot by contributing something valuable. I had fun," which is not to be taken lightly, that's important. "We got feedback. but only by feeding forward. They were so happy to have us there. They're talking about the hand hygiene project in this one. I received a sincere thank you. I felt appreciated. We came out with something that made a difference. So again, by participation in this program, building confidence, and consequently, their perception of who they are in the world and what they can do. So 6th point, structure small wins and failures. This is complicated. Structure small wins and failures is imperative here, at a rapid frequency with a decreasing ratio of wins to failures over time. Basically, said simply, succeed a lot in the beginning and throw in some failures as you move along and gain confidence. Let me illustrate this with, let me tell you the framework behind this, and then I'll illustrate it with. This is based on this wonderful theory by Weick, which is the strategy of small wins, which is that the more small accomplishments we can accomplish, it allows us to tackle larger problems by attributing effects to self-action. So the great story he tells is, you get a lot of people who say, I want to save the world. It's like, wonderful. Well, what are you going to do tomorrow? Right? Like, it's like, great, save the world. Okay. Well, tomorrow I want to actually make environmental impact on the world. Okay. Well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do right now? And if you can get people to think about these small wins, well, I'm going to start using a recycled water bottle. I'm going to recycle my trash, etc. People can work up to saving the world, but they start small. And then second, this theory of self-efficacy, which is something I alluded to earlier, which is that beliefs about the self are constructed through past successful experiences, and initial failures actually can harm beliefs. So if you have too many failures at the beginning, you're not going to go back to it. You're going to not engage with the design product or the experience. But if you have failures near the end, what they'll do is they'll strengthen the belief that even the greatest challenge can be overcome through sustained effort. So if you think personally about yourself, challenges that you've had, they've actually increase commitment over time. So here's how I've done this with the organization. I literally chart with this Design for America organization. I chart the wins and I chart the failures. And if I feel like they've been winning too much, I actually step back and I don't do as much hand-holding, and I try and get them to take on something that's just a little beyond their comfort zone, and have them. I wouldn't say I can't guarantee a success or a failure, but I can know that by perhaps less preparation, they might not be as likely to succeed, and so I can monitor that. And what it does is it forces them, when they have these failures, if you will, it forces them to reflect on why were they working before and what doesn't work anymore. So as an example, the hand hygiene project, I've referred to it a couple times now. They now have a patent pending. It might go to P&G. It might go to Purell. For 6 weeks of work, it's pretty incredible. Whereas this other competition they participated in, the Entrepreneurial Idol competition, they showed up, their business, they didn't do as much preparation as they could have, and they actually had a failed experience, and they actually see this, upon reflection, they see this as an incredible, valuable experience that actually builds their confidence in their ability. So these are a few comments after that failed second experience, if you will, after the competition they did pretty poorly at. They said, I thought we could just climb the success ladder. We were feeling good from winning the social designer competition. We inherently fell in the trap. We pitched the wrong information. It wasn't an appropriate pitch for investors. We couldn't answer the questions like how much money we needed or what the investors would get for the money. Too much confidence is a dangerous thing. Second comment, we hit a big wall that felt impenetrable. The ambiguity was daunting. We just needed to see the gap. Now I'm not afraid to fail anymore. So again, you start to see this common language of too much success, which I think by virtue of you being at Dartmouth, especially for the students and the faculty, everybody, if we have too much success, we actually fall into a kind of a trap, if you will. Seventh principle is creating a community. And this, as I mentioned, the Design for America organization has now started chapters at Cornell and at, I guess we have a Design for Turkey based on the Turkey project, the 1 Week Turkey project, and we may have a Design for England forming as well. Here's the interesting thing about creating community. If you create a community, you create a space in which you can share your stories, both success and failure. And these stories do two things. One is it helps you to make sense of what your experience has been, and secondly, it helps other people to vicariously learn through your experience and build confidence through your experience. So This is based theoretically from a framework of social persuasion that if we're doing a difficult task, we're more likely to persevere if we know others are doing a difficult task. So in the case of Cornell, the Cornell chapter right now is trying to do recruitment. And what happens is that it's wonderful. There's this wonderful dialogue going on between the two organizations, and the Northwestern students are able to tell the Cornell people why they're, how they might tackle this problem and gain more people because they've been through it. And by explaining the story, they actually convince themselves that they're decent at recruiting new students and try out new ideas themselves for recruiting new students. And then secondly, there's wonderful research on the importance of storytelling in organizations and how storytelling, again, allows people to make sense of events and also introduce change. The last and final point is the importance of providing authentic experiences. And I'm sure many of you have experienced this, especially in Engines 21, which is if you're working on a problem that the professor makes up, the feedback you get in terms of what your ability to make impact in the world is pretty minimal. If you're working on a project that really exists and that you've identified as real, you have a different orientation in terms of the impact and the outcome of your work and your confidence consequently to build. And so this is a tool that is trying to offer authentic experiences. The tool is called Better Brainstorms. I think that's what my student came up with it, Molly, the most recent name. And the idea behind this is let's use improv theatrical improv as a way of preparing people for the authentic experience of getting together in groups and generating ideas. So again, I talked a bit about some of my research focuses on process loss and brainstorming and ideation. And what this does is in a task-specific way gets people prepared to look at how is it that they work with each other. And so what it is essentially it's an online tool and reference toolkit that allows people to sort and find different improvisational exercises. You then do the exercise. So on the far left is the tool. In the middle, they do the exercises. And what we find is when you do these exercises prior to a brainstorming interaction, you get, again, comparison of people who have done these tools, use these tools and not use these tools. You get increased collaboration over self-focus. People are more accepting rather than judging. And I think most importantly is they're more likely to take quick action over deliberate and analytical thinking, which deliberate and analytical thinking is very important, but in a brainstorm that's not what you're going for. In fact, those are the people that the person who wants to concentrate on one idea, those are the people that slow you down. You're trying in a brainstorm to generate as many ideas as possible. So this particular tool is designed to provide people with this authentic experience just prior to the brainstorm, again, that allows people to generate ideas in a way that's not directly related to the topic at hand. So the topic may be about how to improve or how to manufacture, let's say, this water bottle, but you start off at first working on activities that actually orient you towards other people, and you design things that are trivial and not important, so people's egos don't get into it. So by the time they get onto the real task at hand, they're oriented towards each other and ready to work. So what I hope I've done through these design principles is giving you a quick overview of how I envision us perhaps designing for confidence and potentially then effectiveness, and that the real big thing here is that we can use design to change people's views of themselves, and that is inherently a new idea. Using designed objects and experiences to change how people see themselves. That's the big takeaway. And I hope that I've communicated ideas of ways that we can intentionally design to change people's views about themselves. And I think there's just incredible amount of potential here in the world. And here's why. If we did not believe we could act, what would our world look like? If we did not believe we could act, if we didn't believe we could act, what would our world look like? I'm going to end by thanking, I have a wonderful group of students that I work with and colleagues at Design at Northwestern and Design for America, and the people who have obviously influenced me here at Dartmouth, at Stanford, and at Northwestern. I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't have the ability to do what if they had not designed experiences for me, I would not have the ability to stand up here and share these thoughts with you. So thank you very much. That's the end of my talk. It's a lot of behavioral science for an engineering classroom. Yeah, please.
This is just a request, not a question, but could you put up your numbered list
Yes.
again so we can try to absorb those while other people ask questions?
And I welcome feedback on these. I actually have since come up with a few others, so I'm happy to share those. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, please.
I suspect some people do this naturally, like, Thomas Edison and inventors. Now, do you think this approach would make most of us Thomas Edison?
You mean in the sense of designing for, like, doing things? Or designing for action? What characteristic of Thomas Edison are you asking that we emulate, or asking you if I want us to emulate? His ability to do lots of things?
Well, even there's just a lot of things that you mentioned that he's very good at.
Right. I think we all have the ability to do this at different levels and different skills. But I think, unfortunately, as a population, I think we're mostly inclined towards living with the status quo and working within a very small sphere. We think our sphere of impact is a lot smaller than I think it potentially could be. So yes, I inherently feel that we all could be more action-oriented and involved in the world. And I guess that belief has become more strongly developed as I have a little toddler who really thinks that she can impact the entire world at 2 years old. And I think we actually, over time, we actually train ourselves out of believing our ability to take action, because we are told consistently that we can't, or we're going to fail if we do, or we're going to fail if we try, or if we do fail, we're a bad person. If our first effort is not successful, we're bad. So yes, I do think we have the ability to do more, to act more. Yes?
Scientists usually think in terms of control to demonstrate the effectiveness of something. And I
Yep.
wonder to what degree you might be able to demonstrate the effectiveness of a design versus non-design. I mean, kind of counter back to, is that ever done in your kind of?
In all the things I've done, I have controls. So I have people who are not doing it that way, but still working it. So for example, this Design for America, it's an extracurricular activity. I have 100 students involved. I also have it's not my personally, I'm involved in it. Every single freshman at Northwestern in engineering takes a design course, and they work on social challenges. So that's my control. Like, they're both working on social challenges. One's for credit, one's not for credit. And when you talk to both of them, you get different responses, because the people who are doing it for credit, that's not a bad thing, but the response is, my attention is always divided between how my teacher is going to evaluate me and what my user, the client, a lot of these students are doing wonderful things like breaks for the handicap softball team. I guess one of the challenges is getting off first base really quickly when you're in a wheelchair. And so they've done this really neat break. It's very exciting. It's cool. It's had impact. I mean, it's actually now, I guess, all of the wheelchair softball teams use this little break. Anyway, but the point is that their attention is divided, and consequently, in terms of attributing, they don't know if they're doing well because the product's being used by lots of people, or because the professor said you got an A. And I think the A is the nemesis to a lot of this work. There's wonderful things to be learned from it, but I think it wouldn't hurt us to complement this formal educational experience, engineering education, with this informal educational experience. And I think what we could do is really totally fundamentally change people's beliefs in themselves. There's some great recent and very interesting. I was just at the National Academy of Engineering, and one of the challenges there in engineering education is that, from an employer's standpoint, when they hire our engineers, and actually, I guess this is true for business students as well, is they hire them and they say, your students are great at analytical thinking, but they can't do anything. right? These are people coming from top schools, top engineering schools. They can't actually apply what they know. They don't take action. They sit around and talk a lot, and they do really great, analysis of the problem. And so how are we going to, from an educational standpoint, how are we going to educate engineers to take action? I actually think that's a real challenge that we want to think very carefully about if we're going to remain a contender as the innovators against. I feel like it's the battle against India and China. It's when you read these articles, it's very humorous. But how are we going to remain active innovators and continue to educate active innovators? And I think one of the ways to do this is give them experiences that can build their confidence to take action in a meaningful way. Yeah.
What do you think are some effective strategies for groups to ensure that members are confident in group brainstorming sessions, are confident to put out their ideas no matter how crazy
But what are good strategies? There's a tremendous amount of research on this. I'll summarize the research in one sentence, which is basically create psychological safety. So make it comfortable for everybody to contribute. One way you do that is eliminate hierarchy. So harking back to my mentor Dave Kelly at IDEO, he started IDEO, a major very successful design consulting company, and he says no matter how much people want him to be in a brainstorm, he won't go, because as soon as he walks in the room, he's a very low status guy. I mean, he doesn't sit at the head of the table. He walks in, he's pretty quiet. It fundamentally changes the dynamic. So if you can eliminate hierarchy and make sure everybody feels like they're on similar ground, and it doesn't matter if the senior person comes in and says, don't mind me, I'm just on the side. Actually, that's not effective. That person may feel more comfortable, but other people don't. So one way is that. Another way is to do some of this priming that I was talking about, preparing people. I use theatrical improv a lot, and I think that's a really effective instrument for getting people in that mindset of sharing ideas. Because if you think about what theatrical improvisers do on stage, is they're improvising a performance. And what are you doing as a designer in a brainstorm? You're improvising solutions to a problem, right? You're both having to come up with ideas on the spot. And so one of the things that theatrical improvisers have trained themselves to do is to say, accept all offers. That's one of their frameworks, accept all offers. So what you do is you practice in this way, and then you get people in a brainstorm, and they're actually much more easily, they're able to transfer the learning, basically, to that experience. It's like any learning experience. If you do it once in a pretty safe, low-stakes environment, you're actually able to get farther when you're in a, if you will, a high-stakes environment. So those are a couple ideas I would suggest. I have some papers that I've written on that. You can steal some ideas directly. They're very concrete. Yeah.
Just a quick question on, just as a follow-up.
Yeah.
You suggested eliminating hierarchy in a group situation, but various research studies have shown that it is actually necessary for some sort of leadership to be present in a group situation for the group to move forward in a single direction or at least in a tentative manner.
Okay, yeah, so let me step back and say, groups can get together for a lot of different reasons, right? Sometimes you really do want hierarchy, and other times you don't. So brainstorming is very specifically an activity in which your group is, your goal is participation. I mean, the reason you group brainstorm is because you want participation, you want the diversity of all the ideas. If you didn't want that diversity, you wouldn't have a group, right? And many people use brainstorm to persuade other people of ideas, which is kind of a little antithetical to what the stated purpose of brainstorming is. So what I would say to you is, if you're in an ideation session, you want to reduce hierarchy. Now, the literature does show that having leadership in the hierarchy is important, but leadership is focused on process, not on contribution of ideas. So you want your leader to actually be focused on how everybody is contributing, and it's better if you don't have the leader contributing ideas, because then they, if you will, they enter the hierarchy, and what will happen is, for better or worse, is hierarchy becomes established in brainstorming whether you like it or not. You can start off with 10 people who are equal status, and by the end, equal status, they're all the same. By the end of a brainstorm, there will be an informal status, there will be an informal hierarchy established based on who came up with the most exciting ideas. you see what I mean? So you can walk out of a brainstorm, everybody walks into equal status, you walk out an hour later, you know who the winner was. Right? I mean, this is not a joke. This is like document. This is how these processes work. So you're already going to have hierarchy established there. What you want is that leader or process facilitator, is another way to think about it, who's managing and making sure that everybody's participating and communicating. But that leader they're not going to nail bad ideas, and they're basically there to reinforce the rules of brainstorming rather than be somebody who contributes to ideas. Does that make sense? There's some wonderful work by a guy named Dave Owens on status hierarchy and brainstorms, which is really fascinating. So if you're interested in following up on that. Anybody else? No?
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, we're done.